Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz and today I have another quick gameplay video for you guys. This was a game I played with some cEDH players from my hometown, Berlin. I'm happy to see the cEDH community growing here in Germany and Europe in general. If you would like to play some games with us in the future, make sure to join my Discord server. But now, let's have a look at the opening hands. Chris goes first with his Najeela list. His opening hand consists of Polluted Delta, Arid Mesa, Mana Vault, Jeweled Lotus, Rhystic Study, Worldly Tutor and Pact of Negation. This hand allows for a turn 1 Najeela and a turn 2 Rhystic Study with protection. Hans is second in turn order with his Kenrith list. He mulled down to 4 and his opener has Scalding Tarn, Elvish Spirit Guide, Rite of Flame and Enlightened Tutor. For his London Mulligan he put Braids, Abrupt Decay and Ad Nauseam under his library. Hans kept this hand because he didn't want to mull even further, and with some fast mana and Enlightened Tutor, he could at least try to get a Rhystic Study out to refuel his hand. I'm third with my Omnath Rainbow Evolution list. My opener consists of Marsh Flats, Lotus Petal, Noxious Revival, Wargate, Ragavan, Birds of Paradise and Mystic Remora. I kept this hand because I could cast a turn 1 fish and birds, and I also have a tutor to cheat Dockside into play when I want to combo off. Jay goes last with his Dargo Thrasios list. He kept a hand with Command Tower, Training Grounds, Imperial Recruiter, Phantasmal Image and Finale of Devastation. For his London Mulligan he put Stomping Ground and Tinderwall under his library. This was a keep because Chris already mulled to 6 going last and his hand allowed for a turn 2 Thrasios into a turn 3 Imperial Recruiter for Dockside, which is basically already WinCon in this deck. All the decks can be found in the description box down below, and now let's get started with the actual game. Chris goes first, he draws for turn. He plays a Polluted Delta and immediately cracks it to get a Tropical Island, which he uses to cast a fish on turn 1. He follows up with a Jeweled Lotus and casts Najeela. Talk about a good turn. He then passes, Hans draws for turn, and he plays a Scalding Tarn. He also cracks it right away to grab a plateau, and he then passes. I draw for turn. I play Marsh Flats and I crack it to get a Tundra. I then use the Tundra to cast a fish, which triggers Chris's fish and he draws a card. My fish resolves and I cast a Lotus Petal, which again triggers Chris's fish and he draws for fish. I then use the Lotus Petal to cast a Birds of Paradise and I then pass my turn. Jay draws for turn. He plays a Command Tower and passes. Chris untaps, draws and pays for his fish, then plays a Plateau and attacks with Najeela. He gets 1 Najeela trigger, everything comes at me, I take the damage and Chris passes. Hans draws for turn, takes no game actions and passes to me. I pay for my fish, draw for turn, play a Arid Mesa, and I pass. Jay untaps and draws, he plays a Training Center and casts Thrasios. He then passes, Chris untaps and lets his fish die, he draws, he swings at me, he gets 2 Najeela triggers, and I respond. Before blockers I crack my Arid Mesa, get a Volcanic Island and pay 2 to cast a Fairy Mastermind. I then jump block Najeela, killing it, and I take 3 damage from the Warriors. Chris then casts a Mana Vault, triggering my Mystic Remora, so I draw. And he follows up with a Rhystic Study, again triggering my Mystic Remora. He passes and Hans draws. He casts a Rite of Flame, triggering the Rhystic and the fish. We both get to draw. Hans then exiles an Elvish Spirit Guide, and with 3 mana in his pool he casts a Wheel of Fortune. Again, we draw from the fish and the Rhystic Study, and in response to the wheel I cast a Noxious Revival, triggering Chris' Rhystic Study. I put the Fairy Mastermind back on top of my library, but Chris decides to force the Wheel of Fortune, giving me another card from the Mystic Remora. Hans is out of options and passes his turn. I untap and I pay for my fish, draw. I play a Forbidden Orchard as my land for turn, tap it, giving Hans a token, and cast Ragavan, letting Chris draw from the Rhystic Study. And then tap my bird to cast an Esper Sentinel, again letting Chris draw from the Rhystic Study. I pass my turn, and Jay untaps, draws a card, and plays a Breeding Pool. He then taps 3 to cast a Imperial Recruiter, letting Chris draw from the Rhystic Study. Jay grabs a Dockside and passes his turn. Chris untaps and plays a Scrubland. He then moves to discard and discards an Eldritch Evolution. Hans untaps and draws for turn. He has no game actions and passes. I untap. I decide to let the fish die now. Draw for turn. And then I pay 4, giving Hans another token to cast Omnath. Chris draws from the Rhystic Study. And I draw from Omnath ETB. I then play a Misty Rainforest, triggering Omnath, giving me 4 life. I crack the Misty Rainforest, get a Taiga and 4 mana of Omnath's second trigger. I use the mana and the land to cast a Wargate for X equaling 2. Chris draws from the Rhystic Study, and in response hardcasts a Fierce Guardianship, giving me 1 card from Esper Sentinel. I have no responses to that and pass my turn. Jay untaps. He draws. He plays a Steam Vents and casts a Training Grounds, triggering both Rhystic and Esper Sentinel, but he pays for the Rhystic Study so I can draw a card. He then passes. Chris untaps. He draws and plays a Taiga. He casts a Lion's Eye Diamond, paying for Esper Sentinel, and continues with a Talisman of Dominance. He then passes. Hans untaps and draws. Again, has no game actions, unfortunately. Very risky wheel there. I move to my turn, untap and draw. I play a Scalding Tarn, triggering Omnath, get 4 life. Crack the Scalding Tarn. I get a Plateau and 4 mana of Omnath's second trigger. I use 3 of the mana to cast a Spellseeker, triggering the Rhystic Study, letting Chris draw. I grab a Neoform with the Spellseeker, and then I use my birds and the floating mana to cast Neoform, sacrificing Ragavan as an additional cost. Chris draws from the Rhystic Study, and Jay activates his Thrasios, revealing a Displacer Kitten. Neoform resolves, I get a Dockside and make 5 treasure tokens. I then pay 3 mana, giving Hans another token, and cast an Eldritch Evolution, sacrificing Omnath as an additional cost. Chris draws from the Rhystic Study, and I tutor up a Deadeye Navigator into play, soulbonding it to Dockside. I can now make infinite treasures, flicker the Deadeye Navigator, and win with Omnath or the Spellseeker. GG. Alright, in total the game lasted 5 turns. Around 26 spells were cast, and the MVPs were Mystic Remora and Esper Sentinel, which allowed me to draw into all the cards I needed to combo off. Fairy Mastermind also had a short appearance as a blocker for Najeela, which of course doesn't show its full potential as a card draw engine, but I guess killing Najeela is also pretty good. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content in the future. This is Eisenherz, and auf Wiedersehen.